Porsche's 911 Turbo can humble virtually any stratospherically priced supercar you care to name in terms of real-world usable performance. It was always fast, but in this 8th generation 992 series version, that speed is more accessible. So it's not only one of the most technologically advanced cars ever built, it's also one of the most exhilarating. In short, another engineering masterclass from Porsche.
Give Porsche £155,000 or thereabouts and it'll hand over the keys to one of the fastest and most capable cars in the world. It's called the 911 Turbo S. Now, that is a lot of money to the vast majority of motorists, but when we're talking about cars that can hurl themselves from a standing start to 62 in under 3 seconds and return well over 200 miles an hour, it's actually quite reasonable. Frighteningly for its rivals in the much improved 992 series guise we're testing here, it's lighter, it's sharper, it rides better, and it manages to be even faster. Porsche, of course, was one of the very first manufacturers to adopt turbo technology with the famous whale-tail 3-litre 930 Series 911 Turbo of 1975, which offered what today seems a relatively paltry 260 PS output. Ever since then, the power on offer with this model line has spiralled upwards across the decades. In '78, a revised 3.3-litre version of the 930 Series Turbo model promised buyers a heady 300 PS, and by 1990 the 3.3-litre 964 series model had increased that output again to 360 PS. Yes, with rear-wheel drive. Things were threatening to get out of hand, so with the next 993 series turbo model of 1995, which developed 408 PS from what was by now a 3.6-litre version of the brand's usual flat 6, Porsche dismayed the purists by standardising four-wheel drive. All mainstream 911 turbos have been all-wheel driven ever since. Which is extra traction that the 21st century versions of this car have certainly needed. Now, the new millennium kicked off with ever more powerful versions of that 3.6-litre flat 6, which developed 420 PS in the 996 series 911 Turbo model of the year 2000 and 480 PS in the replacement 997 series model of 2006. An output raised yet again when a bigger 3.8-litre engine offering 500 PS was installed in the same generation design in 2009. By 2016 and the launch of the 991 series design, all 911s, even the lesser Carrera badged ones, had become turbo powered, but the turbo badged flagship variant continued and it was still using the previous model's 3.8-litre flat 6, but in a more powerful form, producing at least 540 PS. For the 21st century's third decade, though, Porsche reckoned that it was about time that this uber-fast 911 flagship derivative should have a change of heart. Sure enough, this 992 series car was announced in early 2020 with an all-new engine, the 3-litre flat 6 from the ordinary 911 Carrera, but here bored out to 3.8 litres and fitted with symmetrical VTG, variable geometry turbos. It's available with either 580 PS or a jaw-dropping 650 PS in the faster Turbo S form we're trying here. A handful of stratospherically priced supercars are apparently faster on paper, but none outsprint or outhandle this one in the real world. And we're about to find out why. We've been driving 911 turbos of various kinds for decades now, and we've generally thought them utterly brilliant. Our only issue being the usual one with this car, that the uber powerful engine could so dominate the driving experience that just occasionally some of the crucial interactivity that 911s are so famous for sometimes felt as if it was being lost. Now, with this 992 series car, Porsche recognised that problem and set to work to try to rectify it. On the spec sheet, you might wonder whether they have. The gains here, after all, are relatively marginal. A bit of extra track width, a little more downforce, revised steering calibration. You might think that these small improvements could collectively be cancelled out by the 12% increase in power. There is, after all, enough of it to make this, in real-world terms, the fastest car in the world. Yes, a few exotic, lightweight Uber supercars shade it on paper, but in reality, at speed over twisting roads, the reality is that nothing you can buy is faster. Take it from us. We'd like to see anything else beat it on a track too. The engine, a horizontally opposed 3.8 litre version of the standard Carrera's 3 litre flat 6 with larger VTG twin turbos, develops a boomier, more intense soundtrack, especially with the optional sports exhaust fitted, and it simply hurls this car at the horizon. Onto the figures, which assume that you'll specify the optional Sport Chrono package, as virtually all buyers do. Flick the drive mode from Sport into Sport Plus, and in the 580 PS form used in the standard turbo, 62 from rest occupies 2.8 seconds en route to 199 miles an hour. That's if you're quick with the paddle shifters for the new 8-speed PDK twin clutch auto gearbox. Now, it's hard to imagine how that could be insufficient, but if it is, then in the 650 PS Turbo S, the stats are massaged up to 2.7 seconds and 205 miles an hour. Think only a fractional difference if you choose the cabriolet body style rather than this coupe. All very nice, but as we've already suggested, lack of power was never a problem for this car in the first place. Tactile driver involvement was always the issue. Now, purists will always tell you that less is more in that respect, but perhaps a few purists need to drive this car if that's what they really think. Let's look at how this car has evolved. There's Porsche's latest all-wheel drive system, which constantly varies the torque between the front and rear axles. Plus, there's active suspension and rear axle steering, which subtly turns the rear wheels as you corner. And you also get a completely new PAA, Porsche Active Aerodynamic package, with active aero flaps and an active rear wing, which is lighter and larger than before. There's even an air brake system to assist the phenomenal stopping power of the carbon ceramic brake discs. They're standard fit on this Turbo S. It's all enough to introduce a small but significant degree of control and extra refinement, whether the drive dynamics are being exercised on a country road, a speed unlimited autobahn, or a racetrack. Other issues? Well, perhaps for our taste, the suspension is maybe a touch over firm for road use. The ride rarely seems to settle, however you fiddle with the settings of the standard dynamic chassis control system. But Porsche clearly thinks that that is what the potential 911 Turbo owner wants. Well, perhaps they're right. What isn't up for debate, though, is that this is the fastest, it's the most involving, and it's the most complete rocket ship for the road that Porsche has ever made. You don't need to be a car enthusiast to recognise the distinctive shape of a 911, but you may need to be a bit of a Porsche-phile to identify the visual changes which have created this 992 series 3.8 litre turbo model. Most of them are based around active aerodynamics. The active cooling flaps are new, so is the variable front spoiler lip, and the headlamps have changed too. They're still round and seamlessly integrated into the wings, of course, in classic 911 style, but they're now narrower with full LED beams as standard. Now, these are of the intelligent matrix sort, which use so-called X-sight technology with laser light style beams, courtesy of 84 individual LEDs that work together, masking oncoming traffic while simultaneously increasing illumination in your own lane. Body style choice, as before, lies between this coupe or an even more exclusive cabriolet version with a canvas hood that can be raised or lowered in only 12 seconds. There's no glass-roofed Targa option, sadly. As usual on a current 911, the wide arches house different rim sizes. You have 20-inch alloys at the front and 21 inches at the rear. The alloys here sport the black brake calipers of this Turbo S model's standard PCCB Porsche ceramic composite braking system. At the rear you get this tilting rear wing which aids a drag coefficient that can be as sleek as 0.33 CD. Arguably more important than any of that though is what now lies beneath this voluptuous panelwork. Now, it seems strange to remember that as recently as the 997 series turbo model just 2 generations ago, 911s of this sort were completely crafted from old-fashioned galvanized steel. These days, apart from the front and rear aprons, the outer skin is entirely made of aluminium. Enough time to take a seat up front, for which power-operated door handles spring out to allow you to enter. Inside, although it doesn't have the vodka bar chic of a Maserati or the Old Spice machismo of an Aston, the interior is as classy as the exterior lines would suggest, if a bit subdued for a car bearing a £150,000 price tag. As in an ordinary Carrera, the dashboard flows in an unbroken span across the entire width of the interior. Through this grippy 3-spoke wheel lies a defiantly analogue central rev counter, without which a Porsche, well, simply wouldn't be a Porsche. But the 2 7-inch readouts that sit either side of it are actually configurable freeform displays. Now, the left one doesn't do very much, but the right one can give you things like G-force readings, GPS mapping, a stopwatch, all-wheel drive readings, and a performance power graph. Now, beyond these readouts, there are 2 outer dials too. The left one is for time and temperature, the right one for fuel and turbo boost. Just about everything else you need to know is covered off by this generously sized 10.9-inch flush-mounted Porsche communication management touchscreen display in the centre of the dash. This monitor is, of course, also multi-configurable. Its home screen is based around personalisable tiles that you can move about, rather like the files on a desktop screen. It's the car screen that you'll be using most, and that's to select your preferred settings for drive modes, chassis setup, and the state of the exhaust note, and the spoiler levitation too. All of it delivered with glorious graphical clarity. Once you've dialed in your preferences, you can save them as a bespoke setting by pressing the individual button, and then gain our one-touch access to the drive package that you've put together by using the provided toggle switch favourite buttons, which are part of the row of 5 smart toggle switches that sit below the infotainment screen and feature a lovely knurled metal finish. Some of the main controls are very different this time around. There's no slot into which you can insert the car-shaped key, for example, because a keyless entry and start switch system has now been standardised. You have to click instead this controller to the right of the steering column. That isn't particularly tactile fitting, nor is the new auto gear stick. It's now much smaller. It's perhaps too small, really, for the importance of its function. And while we're griping about fixtures and fittings, the steering wheel spoke mounted drive mode dial that you get with the Sport Chrono pack still feels like something you'd buy in Lidl. As always in a 911, all-round visibility is, as we remarked a few moments ago, of a completely different order to anything you'll find in any other super sports car. The classically distinctive bulges around the headlamps give you a really clear idea as to where the front wheels are, and that makes car park manoeuvring considerably easier than it would be in a lower-slung rival. Slim windscreen pillars mean your front three-quarter view isn't impeded at junctions, and even your rearward perspective is really good. It's better, in fact, than on some family hatches, thanks to that deep rear window that allows you to place the back of the car accurately. Now, with most rival super sports cars, Audi's R8, Aston Martin's Vantage, the Mercedes-AMG GT and McLaren's 540C, for example, this is where we'd be finishing our tour of the cabin. But the 911 has its reputation as the most practical model in the class to uphold, hence the continued inclusion of these 2 small rear seats. You'd have to do without that in the brand's 718 Cayman and Boxster models, but those two cars have a mid-engine configuration which frees up space for a rear boot compartment, which of course with this twin-turbo 3.7 litre 6 slung out the back here, you don't get with this 911, just this little flap that rises to reveal an engine plaque and access to various service reservoirs. That means anything you can't fit inside therefore has to go in the 132 litre compartment that's provided beneath this sculpted bonnet. Ultimately, you can't really make the most of what's on offer here unless you pay extra for the tailored 911 luggage set. You never thought Porsche 911 turbo motoring would be cheap, did you? And of course, it isn't. List pricing suggests you'll be paying from around £135,000 for the standard turbo coupe and about £156,000 for this turbo S coupe, at around £9,000 in each case if you want the cabriolet body style. And the spec, well, it's probably easier to talk about the things this turbo model doesn't have as standard. Pretty much everything you'd really want does come as standard, particularly on this Turbo S. But you may want to pay a bit more for features like the sports exhaust, the lowered PASM sports suspension, a lightweight carbon roof, night view assist, adaptive cruise control and park assist with a surround view camera. Like all the latest 992 Series 911s, this one isn't exactly over-endowed with camera safety kit. There is Porsche Active Safe autonomous braking, plus lane change assist, which stops you from dangerously pulling out if there's a vehicle in your blind spot. And there's lane keep assist, and that will alert you if you've drifted out of your lane on the highway, and then it'll subtly steer you back to where you ought to be. Now this package is combined with traffic sign recognition, which pictures road signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. Even the fastest cars in the world need to be seen to be efficient these days, and the 911 Turbo turns in an impressive performance at the pumps for a car of its capability. Let's get to the WLTP figures. Both the standard Coupe Turbo and this Coupe Turbo S manage up to 23.5 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 271 grams per kilometre of CO2. What else? Well, both models are covered by a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty package, and the 911 also has 12 years of corrosion cover and a 3-year paint guarantee. Insurance for a car of this power and performance is never going to be cheap. Both variants attract a top-of-the-shop Group 50 rating. Still, residual value percentages are uber high, think in the late 50s after 3 years of ownership or even better. Bear in mind that depreciation will take a hit if you load your car up with too many unnecessary pricey extras though. There's a wider dealer network that many rivals can offer, and you'll only need to visit your local Porsche centre every 2 years or every 20,000 miles, whichever comes around first. There's no option to buy into a prepaid servicing package at point of purchase, but the brand does provide a fixed price servicing approach, which makes sure that you'll know in advance exactly what work is going to be carried out and what it's going to cost. There are basically 3 kinds of supercar. The first group, Astons, AMG Mercs and the like, are very fast and very stylish, but they aren't quite so much at home on twisties or racetracks. The second group, Ferraris and Lambos and so on, they very differently are, but they need the genius of a Schumacher or an Alonso to wring the very best from them. Nor would you really want to nip down to the shops in them. Which leaves the third group, a very exclusive one indeed, for cars that can combine everything in one exhilarating, everyday usable package. Audi's R8 gets close to qualifying here, but at the end of the day, we would narrow membership down to just one car, this one. This 3.8 litre 992 Series 911 Turbo is faster than ever, but most importantly, it's at last speed that mere mortals can enjoy to the full. It is, at last, the definitive supercar.